So how did we get started? Well, in 1993, we made the big decision. All future buses would be natural gas powered. And the idea was we were going to go all in. Lots of transit systems, Reading, York, Pittsburgh, a number of others, put their toe in the water. But we said, no, we're all in. And we developed partnerships. And partnerships are really important. I suspect that's one of the reasons that you're all here today, to think about partnerships. Columbia Gas of Pennsylvania, they're our local gas company. The Pennsylvania DEP, the Federal Transit Administration, PennDOT, and our local municipalities. Everybody had a hand in this partnership. We got started in '95. And like I said, I arrived at CATA in '95, so the groundwork had been laid, but it fell to me to implement the program. So in '95 we started construction, and we built compressors, made building modifications, and Columbia Gas, to their credit, they handled the entire project. And I'll say it several times, if it hadn't been for them holding our hands, we never could have been successful. Then in '96, we took delivery of our first buses. And if any of you are familiar with CATA in State College, you know that right next door is a Unimart store. It was one of those happy coincidences. We were looking to promote natural gas as a vehicle fuel. They needed an easement on the back corner of our property. So a deal was struck. We would provide natural gas, they would install a dispenser, and they would get their easement. So they've been dispensing natural gas at Unimart ever since 1996. So then, you know, we got our first buses in '96, but that was just the beginning. We needed, as I said, to replace the whole thing. So we got more buses in '97, we got more buses in '98, again in 2001, and again in 2004. And we were correct. My predecessor had it right on the money. By going to natural gas, we attracted funding that we never would have gotten with diesel. In 1999, we needed additional fueling capacity. Now, this has been a terrific learning experience. And some things we learned were really good, some things we learned not so good. But one of the things we learned was that our original compressors didn't have nearly the capacity that we needed as our fleet grew. But our good friends at Columbia donated to us a third compressor that was identical to the first two. So, you know, now we ended up with the two compressors in the building and the third one kind of on the porch. But they donated it and we installed it, and it gave us the capacity we needed. In 2002 and 2003, we kept making improvements. We placed a canopy over the fuel island. You know, our building was built assuming that we were going to use diesel and be able to fuel indoors. With natural gas, it's just really problematic to fuel indoors, so we moved the dispenser outside. The guys were having to fuel in the weather, and that just wasn't right. So we installed the canopy. We also put in a backup dispenser. Now, you know, there aren't too many things that cause me to lose sleep at night, but if you think about it, one of the challenges, particularly in the early days, we were the only game in town. We had 2 and then 3 compressors, but we only had 1 dispenser. And I used to lose sleep at night that maybe something would go wrong and somebody would back a bus into the dispenser and we'd be out of business. So we bought a second one and we purposely put it way over on the other side of the yard so that we wouldn't run the risk of having both of them go out at the same time. In 2005, 10 years after we got started, we completed the transition, and we got a couple of these Ford cutaways fueled with natural gas, and that completed our transition to 100% natural gas. But we, of course, couldn't just stop then. We just had to keep on going. And we did a deal with Penn State, with their Larson Transportation Institute. We did a hydrogen bus. And without going into all the details, let's suffice to say that natural gas is a good fuel, but not perfect fuel. If you can combine natural gas and hydrogen, you can take what are already pretty low level emissions and drive it down to practically nothing. That's what we were experimenting with. I have to say, probably the biggest thing we learned was it's awfully difficult to merge day-to-day operations with academic research. They're just two different worlds. 2008, 2009, by this time we had had our compressors for a dozen years, and we were fortunate. We've always had great support from our elected officials. Congressman Peterson at the time was very supportive of natural gas. He helped us with a congressional earmark to replace the two of the original compressors. And we also at that time got an integrated gas dryer. Part of the learning experience. As I said, we learned a lot. Originally, the dryer that we had for the gas was mounted on a trailer, and the idea was it was going to come around once in a while and dry down the desiccant in our units. That never worked. We had to have our own dryer. And this is something, one of those learning experiences we didn't understand. You use natural gas in your kitchen range or your furnace. You don't worry about any moisture. Not a problem. But I can tell you, if you have moisture in your gas, you got a bus out on a cold winter day, you run the risk that you're going to have some freeze-ups. We never did, but we sure came close.
I had to stop there.
Okay, in 2009, 2010, we just kept going. We expanded the fleet. We found out that Orlando had put their toe in the water and decided that they weren't going to continue. And they had some buses that were almost identical to what we were running. So we worked a deal, and frankly, they gave us the buses. We had to repaint them, we had to get them to State College, but the buses themselves were free to us. And then we took two that we got from Orlando, and we traded them with our good friends up in Indiana, Pennsylvania. They had some buses that were really too big for what they needed, and the buses from Orlando were a little bit too small for what we needed. So we worked another deal. And so we've ended up, now we've got buses from all over the place. 2012, we were at the point where we started replacing the first generation of natural gas buses with the current generation. We got 28 of these new Flyer Excelsior buses, and we replaced our 1996 Orions and our 1997 buses that came from Orlando. Now, as Carl will tell you, our intention was to get rid of all the 96 buses, but our program has been growing, and so we held on to 7 of the original 96 buses. And we have 2 of them now back in service, and I wouldn't be surprised that sooner or later the other 5 will find their way back on the streets of State College as well. Now what's involved? There's no rocket science here. We got compressors. We get the gas from the street at about 50 psi. We crank it up to about 4,000. And then from the compressor, it goes into those storage bottles. I don't think this pointer really works very well on that screen, but you can see them on the right there. They're not so much storage as they are a device to allow us to fuel efficiently. And I'm not enough of a technician. Probably there are people in the room that can describe this far better than me. But by using this cascade system, we're able to fuel the buses more efficiently than if we were relying just on the compressors alone. And then from those bottles, it goes into the dispenser, and it dispenses into the vehicles, not too much differently than what you would with a diesel or gasoline. There's not much to show on the buses. I mean, obviously, on a bus, you put the tanks on the roof. I was talking to somebody earlier. We got almost unlimited real estate up there. We could put a lot of tanks on the roof of the bus. We put enough tanks up there so that the buses can go 300 miles. We could probably get 400 miles or more, but we don't need it. So why buy the extra tanks? Why carry them around? The fuel filler is not too different than what you would see with diesel. Obviously, because it's a pressure situation, it's a coupling. You just latch right onto the bus. And I could show you the engine compartment, but at least from my eyes, I can't see any difference between what it looks like and what it looks like. This is one thing that maybe doesn't get talked about too much, but there are building improvements that need to be considered. In our building, we sprinkled those detectors all around the building, and then there's a fairly sophisticated switchgear that's involved, so that if the detector senses a little bit of natural gas, it turns on some big exhaust fans and opens all of the overhead doors. If it gets a little bit more natural gas, then it turns off all the electricity in the building, so you don't risk any explosion. This is critical. Employee buy-in. Carl came on board in 2005, I think. And so by that time, we had been in this for 9 years. But this is really true. Initial resistance gave way to skepticism, then tolerance, then support, and now enthusiasm. I think almost without exception, the people that work at CATA today are enthused about the fact that we use natural gas and we become such leaders in that area. But it takes time, and you really have to work at it. The benefits, public support. Now, I'm here to tell you, I've been managing transit systems since 1977. And this is the most popular program with the general public that I've ever been associated with. The benefits, energy independence, you heard about that earlier today. 90% plus of the natural gas that's consumed here comes from North America. It's a locally grown fuel. In Center County, we've been producing natural gas since the 50s. So when we got into this in the early 90s, we were already recognizing that this was a locally grown fuel, and we didn't even know what the word Marcellus was. Air quality, like I said earlier, it's not a perfect fuel, but it's pretty darn good. The particulates are just gone. The hydrocarbons are greatly reduced. Nitrogen oxides are still there. And my understanding is that natural gas does not ignite nearly as readily as you might think. And in order for it to burn in a diesel engine, you actually have to have a spark plug. So you end up with a fairly rich mixture, which leads to nitrogen oxides. I may not have that quite right, but that's my story. and this has turned out to be, who knew? Who knew that today we would be buying natural gas as cheap as we are? When we were doing the pro formas way back in the early 90s, we were estimating $3 gas. And people were raising their eyebrows and saying, no way. And for a while, they were right. It did go up. But then it came back down, and it's down. And as far as the futures market indicates, it's going to be down for a good time to come. We're saving at least $1 million against what we would pay for diesel. And then, of course, we just think it's the right thing to do. Energy independence, supports the state economy, helps keep the air clean, and it saves us money. A little bit about the number. How many doing on time? I don't want to.
That's fine. Go.
Okay.
I mean, this is very interesting. I think people need to hear it.
Okay. The infrastructure. We've made quite an investment. Now, we're government, and we've had access to government programs. Although a lot of these programs now are available to anybody. But initially, we were relying on programs that were oriented towards government entities. We've got over $2 million invested. Now, part of that is because we've had it so long, we started replacing the original equipment. The costs, the buses are an extra $50,000 each. That's not chicken feed, but you get your money back pretty quickly. The impact on maintenance costs. People ask me that question, and I have to acknowledge I don't have a good answer. We haven't bought a new diesel bus in 30 years. So I have no way of comparing head-to-head a diesel versus natural gas. And comparing a 25-year-old diesel with a brand new CNG, that didn't make any sense at all. But we think it is a little bit higher simply because it's a more complicated engine. I mean, it's got a spark plug. It uses a higher quality lubricating oil. You've got a fire suppression system. You've got the tanks that have to be inspected. So we think that there are extra costs there. And we estimate that it's about, for us, about a half an FTE overall. Full-time equivalent employee. But here's the savings. Right now, our natural gas cost, including this 50-cent per gasoline gallon equivalent tax credit, is down under 25 cents a gallon. Now, to be fair, we don't pay any road taxes. We're exempt from that. But we pay 3 different ways. We pay a marketer, which arranges to purchase the gas for us. We pay for the commodity itself, and we pay for the transmission of the gas from wherever it comes from to our meter. So we pay 3 different bills, but when you add them all together and you subtract the tax credit, yeah, I'm here to tell you, it is really, really inexpensive. Now, the tax credit's probably not going to be there forever, but even if the tax credit went away, we'd still be well under $1 a gallon. What did we learn? Well, first of all, we couldn't have done it alone. You got to have partners in this. Like any major transition, it takes time. We paid the penalty for taking the lead. If you guys are all considering natural gas as a vehicle fuel, you'll be able to benefit from the lessons that we and other early adopters learned. It's critical. Oh, there are a lot of surprises. Boy, did we get surprised. Things that we never imagined, we learned. Critical to have good people, and people who know what they're doing and can learn quickly. When I give this presentation, I have a little bit more time, I talk about Ed. We've got a mechanic, Ed Del Baggio, who saved our bacon. He was the guy who worked second shift when all the buses were being fueled, and he became our product champion. He's the guy that learned all there was to know about the compressors, all there was to know about the technology on the buses. And time again, when we had a problem, Ed came to our rescue. We survived simply because we had to. As I said earlier, we didn't put our toe in the water. We went full bore. And having gone full bore, we couldn't back away. We had to make it work. And again, it's been the best success that I could ever imagine. If you're going to do this, things to think about, partnerships, good. There's a lot to learn, technically and otherwise. It's going to take you time. It's going to take you more time than you ever think it will. You're going to have surprises. Just be prepared. You got to have an Ed. You got to have a champion. And like I said earlier, I think if you're going to get into natural gas, make the commitment. Don't just put your toe in the water. Where do we go from here? Well, we're promoting natural gas as a vehicle fuel. That's why I'm here. You know, that's why we're working with Unimar, our next door, to help them get a more modern dispenser. We're working with our local municipalities to enable them to fuel at our facility. We're supporting other community initiatives. We're doing everything we can as a public sector entity. We've probably given 50 tours of our facility, trying to help people understand what's worked for us. We're trying to pursue the continuation of the tax credit. We're going to buy some more vehicles. We're going to get some more CNG cutaways, the little body-on-chassis, 24-passenger vehicles. 24-foot-long vehicles. And we're going to start getting some CNG-powered sedans. We've never used any vehicles powered by natural gas other than our buses, but that's our next step. We're going to continue to do tank replacements. That is something to think about. These tanks don't last forever. And when those tanks get to the end of their certified life, they have to be replaced or the vehicle won't pass inspection. Now, anymore, the vehicle tanks are 20-year tanks. Our buses came with 15-year tanks because that's what was available 15 years ago. And we found ourselves in a position of having buses that were just about wore out, that we had to put some new tanks on. And then lastly, CNG electric hydrogens. You know, I know there's a bus sitting outside that Dale Holland from over at Amtrak has brought over. You know, natural gas works for us. Maybe it doesn't work for everybody. But I think one thing that we would like to do is marry up the technology, the diesel electric, or the CNG electric, with to get the best of both worlds. But here's the real, the real weird situation. Natural gas is so inexpensive, it's hard to justify the extra cost of the CNG electric propulsion system. You can't save enough money because the commodity is so inexpensive to start with. Last thing I want to talk about is safety. When we got started in this, just like any other situation, our employees were really concerned. They had this view that maybe they were driving around with this big Hindenburg on the roof of the bus. And there was some real skepticism. But you may recall in 1996, the Olympics were held in Atlanta. And the natural gas industry was really promoting natural gas as a vehicle fuel And transit systems were encouraged to loan buses to the Olympics. And so we did. We loaned 4 buses. And they put them on flatbeds and trucked them from State College all the way to Atlanta. And they worked fine during the Olympics. And they put them back on the trucks, and back they came. One of the flatbed drivers took an unapproved detour, and he struck an overcrossing. And he struck it so hard that he literally caved in the roof of the bus. Struck it so hard that they scraped right along the top of those tanks to the point that one of them burst. But there wasn't any fire, there wasn't any explosion. There was just this immediate traumatic release of all this high-pressure gas, and that was it. And so what we learned from that, unfortunately, there was $80,000 worth of damage to the bus. Unfortunately, the truck driver's insurance covered the cost. But we learned that maybe this wasn't a fuel that was any more dangerous than diesel or gasoline or anything else. But I did bring with me a little piece of the tank so you can see what it looked like.
And I seen the picture up in your in there, and I saw that when I was there as well.
So I'll pass this around. We use composite tanks, and if you can just imagine, it's on a flatbed and it strikes something and it scrapes and it scrapes and it scrapes, and all of a sudden it bursts. Well, that's what it looked like. So the lesson we learned was it was kind of a catastrophe, but in a roundabout way, it was positive because it reinforced that this stuff was okay. And since that time, knock on wood,
I'm often asked, what are the obstacles to CNG becoming mainstream? And really there's 4 obstacles. Number 1 is money. Everybody wants to see the quick return on the dollar. Number 2 is education. There are very, very few people willing to share the knowledge, willing to take the time to teach people what they need to know to make an effective alternative fuel. And one thing you touched on were the skeptics. There are a lot of people out there that are going to tell you this just simply won't work. You can't work, it doesn't make any sense. And some of those skeptics go so far as to fabricate their own stories as to why it won't work. And I've dealt with this now for a number of years. My background in this, I've been in the compression industry for 30 years. And 8 years ago, we went out on a limb and we converted our fleet to CNG. And we built our own compression station for ourselves, mainly out of necessity. But then we noticed in the process of going through that same learning curve that you had gone through was that this makes sense for everybody. Small fleets, big fleets, public entities, private individuals. How do we get everybody on this path? Well, I've been used to hearing a lot of critics over those years. Some of them financial institutions, like, you're crazy, that'll never wash out financially. Well, it does wash out financially. The biggest critics now have become the petroleum industry. And you have to ask yourself, why is the petroleum industry becoming a critic of natural gas as an alternative fuel? And quite frankly, it's fear. They're afraid of losing a portion of the market share. And most recently, we've had some very negative comments made that are not based at all on fact. And rather than dwell on the negative, I'm here to just basically give you my 2 cents about how it's worked for me and why it makes sense and why it's going to continue to make sense. And I look at energy security, national security, and diversity of security of energy sources all in the same basket, if you will. We have to have all of them. Right now, we export $1.2 million of cash flow per minute across the pond. And most of that $1.2 million a minute goes to our enemies to purchase fuel. Now, everybody in this room is either an employee or an entrepreneur or involved in government. You have a job. So by virtue of having a job, you pay taxes. And those taxes you pay contribute to the health and the welfare and the guns and the bullets and the ammunition and the meals for our troops. And God bless them, they deserve it. Regardless of what you think about it, they're defending our interests every day. But by the flip side of things, all of us in this room are oil consumers. And by being oil consumers, we're feeding our enemy and providing them with the guns, bullets, and ammunition that they're shooting back at our loved ones that are serving. That's my biggest motivation for all of us. So I have to question when a petroleum industry comes out and says CNG and natural gas, electric and hybrids and all these things that are a farce that won't work. Okay, we're going to get a little political here. Whose side are you really on? If you're advocating that we continue to buy foreign oil, knowing full well the cost of that foreign oil over a domestically produced natural gas resource, I have to question the motivation. I can understand why the Arabs want us to keep buying oil, and the Kuwaitis and everyone else and all the OPEC nations. I can't understand why the oil producers cannot get behind alternative energy sources. We're not asking anyone to throw oil away and quit using it. We don't want natural gas to become the next oil and have everyone holding us by the throat with natural gas. We need diversity. We need several different types of energy to have energy security. If there's another big storm in the Gulf and oil resources are interrupted for a couple of weeks, natural gas can help fill in the gap. We need a 10 to 20% less dependence on oil to keep everybody honest. The oil producers, you know, one of the Saudi kings made a statement a year and a half ago, and it stuck with me to this day. I think about it all the time. He said, as long as we keep the price below $95 a barrel, the Americans won't worry about alternative energy. They'll continue to be fat, dumb, and happy. And you know what? He's right. As soon as oil gets up over $100 a barrel, we all scramble to the alternative energy table and try to figure out something else. As soon as it starts to come back down, we become less interested in alternatives. And, oh, that's just the price of business, and we'll keep going. Well, I'm here to tell you it makes perfect sense. My business 8 years ago, I converted from oil-based to natural gas CNG vehicles. We have everything from zero-turn lawnmowers to a tractor-trailer and anything in between that runs on natural gas. My wife drives a natural gas car. My daughter drives a natural gas vehicle. I came here today in a natural gas vehicle. So it made so much sense for me that I took my entire compressor business that I'd been in for 33 years, and we basically scrapped everything else we're doing, and our entire focus now is on natural gas. So we've built our own fuel stations, we've built fuel stations for other people, and we're continuing to pioneer forward in CNG. So again, I think you need to be very aware of the people that are giving misinformation out there and discouraging you from doing this. You have to ask, what's their motivation? You need to listen to all the facts. You need to get the facts from people who know what they're talking about. And believe me when I say this, there are very, very few people who have all the facts. There are some people that want to present a slanted view that basically if you do this, it's wrong. If you do this, you're going to blow up. I've heard all kinds of horror stories over the years, and I've laughed at a few of the ones I've heard today. But recently, the Petroleum Production Corporation, which owns a lot of the terminals that distribute liquid fuels, they came out with a letter to everybody that's in the petroleum business saying that natural gas, both LNG and CNG, are a farce. They don't make economic sense. They're unsafe. It's a disaster waiting to happen. And when you read the 4.5-page letter, there's not one single fact that's based in truth, or that is a fact. It's just an opinion that somebody wrote, and they didn't even author the letter. But the point is they put it out there to everybody in the petroleum business, trying to discourage them from pursuing alternative energy. And to what end? To keep the price of oil high, to keep you chained to that gasoline pump instead of finding something else. So that's my message, and I'll be brief about it. but I'll also be here to answer questions. And again, I want to applaud Aaron for his efforts and everybody in this room. If somebody would have told me 7 or 8 years ago some of my best friends would work for utility companies, I'd say, are you crazy? I've got to say, Tish is a good friend, and she'd be a good friend even if she didn't work for People's Gas, and I hadn't known her through business. Everybody that's here today that has spoke or is involved in this has a true, genuine concern about our national interests and our economic interests. When it boils down to, is the last country standing with energy wins. Take all the politics away, take everything else away, the last country that has energy wins, because our entire economy is driven on energy. Thank you.
Thank you.